All right, guys, good evening. It is Monday night, not Tuesday night. We have Professor Pat Akos with us, former teammate of mine, and we got some good stuff going on tonight. Pat, thank you for joining us. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
It's great to be here, Bernard. I really appreciate you doing this whole setup here.
Oh, this is a lot of fun. And I have two quick questions that have already been submitted.
Oh, no.
And the statute of limitations has expired on one, but not the other. Can you still dunk a basketball?
All right, so I need to clarify from your post here. So that dunk contest was halftime of the LSU basketball game when Shaq was playing for LSU. I think Gerald Collins and I probably tied, I would say. Now, Tom Vincent was way last because he's an unathletic offensive lineman, of course. But Tony Jackson, just because he is about half our size and actually could get up there, he's the one that won it. So I did not win the dunk contest, but close second, I'd say. Well, but can I still? Yeah, I already had the knee replacement, so I probably can't. But get close, maybe.
Well, until we get some of these other contestants on here, I failed to ask Gerald, or maybe we did talk about it a few months ago. As far as we're concerned for tonight, you won the contest until it gets refuted by the other contestants.
Hey, and we had a hell of an intramural basketball team because all four of us, I think, played on the same team. So we had a good team.
And I think that would have been the fall of '89, your freshman fall, if I'm correct, if you graduated in '93.
Yeah, it might have been 90, but it was somewhere maybe. Well, yeah, I don't know for sure.
This, if it's Shaq coming to Vanderbilt, I was there because that was my senior year, your freshman year. So that had to have been the fall of '89. But here's the more important question. And it's really a two-parter, Pat, and I need you to be truthful with us.
All right.
Did you or did you not wear Kelly Grays to class more than one time?
Who submitted that? Probably everybody. Yes, that doesn't
matter.
I have Kelly Grays probably in my drawer right now. So
that's the second question: whether you still own Kelly Grays.
Well, now I have UNC-Chapel Hill has this in gym. They still give out like athletic gear at the gym, and they're Grays that say FP Frank Porter Graham, and they're from at least the 70s. And I have a few of those shirts in my drawers too.
All right, I do have a request for when we finish. If you still have any of your Kelly Grays, we got to have a picture or two. Not with you wearing them, please.
Right.
Up or we got.
I'll see what I can find.
Pat, we got some folks rolling in. Emma Harris says to tell you hello. Let's see, we got Mark Matlock says hey, and I know some others are going to roll in. Guys, I'm with Pat Akos. He played '89 to '93 for Watson and Dinardo, and I want to go there for just a few minutes, Pat, and then we'll jump back to Cleveland and how you got to school. I played only for Watson during my 4 years. Watson's fifth year would have been, I guess, '90 when you played for him your sophomore year, and then Dinardo came in. Huge contrast, I've always been told, not only in personalities, but approach. You probably were part of the bell buckle, and I hope it's still not bringing you some PTSD. But I want to contrast a little bit because you also switched positions. You were a defensive player, then you became a tight end. So talk a little bit about, you get recruited by one coach and signed by Watson, but then you come in, then Dinardo comes in and you're not one of his guys. And sometimes that creates a real problem between the older guys who are already on the roster versus the new guys and the mentality of the new staff. What was going on with you personally and how all that transition was taking place?
Yeah, let me walk through kind of some. I'll try to address that. If I don't, Bernard, ask me again. But so Bill Schmitz, if you remember him, he came to a couple of basketball games up in Cleveland. We went to the Final Four, so that was how I got to Vanderbilt. I went to I think Michigan State and Villanova in January for visits and muddling through a bunch of snowstorms. And then I got to Vanderbilt the third week of January. It was beautiful. So Watson, of course, can charm anybody. His brother, Mac, is the coach at UNC-Chapel Hill. I went to see him recently, and we called Watson and he was on the golf course and didn't answer. But Watson was just easy to say yes to, of course. So came in, had a really good experience. Got thrown in to the Wolves on defense, learned a lot from a lot of folks, and then moved over to offense. But before that, let's see, bell buckle, I'm missing my years here, but you mentioned bell buckle. one of my best experiences at Vanderbilt was belt buckle because first of all, I was injured some, and so I didn't have to do all the conditioning, and all my teammates hate me for that. But the other one was I roomed with Derek Sarter. So I don't know if you remember this then, and you weren't there maybe then, but this was Dinardo, I thought maybe, but he had always us room with a white guy, black guy. I think he tried to make that happen, and offense, defense. Best learning experience ever. I room with Derek Sarter, defensive end, and we watch Good Times often on the TV there. So, and he would not let me change the channel, and I was a little bit scared of all the Q dogs, so I did not change the channel. But that was a great experience. But to your relevant question about,
well, I was going to say, if you'll just freeze for just a second about that. Sarter being from Atlanta, who Big D is now down in the Dominican, he's serving up his version of some awesome barbecue down there. Derek's been on our show, cool. But I want to know, what foods did he introduce to you that you had not had growing up in Cleveland at that point? Did he introduce some Southern soul food? Did you go home to Atlanta or to meet any of them?
No, I did not have that opportunity. We had belt buckle food, and then I think even on the road we roomed together some my first year, and it was just the hotel food. So I did not get introduced to his. I'm gonna have to look him up to find out his cuisine nowadays.
Yeah, he's all over our page, and of course he's on Facebook. But I think it's Big D or Big Daddy's Barbecue in the Dominican. OJ Fleming has joined us, and Andrea Poole Kane has joined us. So thank you guys. I've got Pat Akos as my guest tonight. But go back to your story. We're talking about the contrast in Watson and Dinardo, a little belt buckle in that time period.
So again, I don't know if I have the time period right, but I moved to tight end. Steve Sloan, I think, was our offensive coordinator at that time, or came in around that time. He was exceptional. I think he taught me, I think not just football, but how to be a man a little bit. And he was really influential to me. So moving over to offense wasn't that big a deal because we ran we moved to the run of the I-bone. We were kind of running a wishbone, I-bone type of thing. So I was a glorified offensive lineman too. And had a really good spring. The transition to Dinardo, it felt more disciplinary. It felt if you were doing what he expected you to do or wanted you to do, then you were in his kind of good house, I thought. And I tried to do, and I think I stayed on that side. So I always had a really positive experience with Coach Dinardo. Thought he was a great motivator. I had Hal Hunter as a position coach. That was different because he's a really intellectual kind of guy, the way he approached football. And I think I learned a ton from him. So I think there was a big challenge when they came in, but as long as you really gave it your best effort, even if you weren't the best player, but you showed that you were willing to learn, I think it was a positive experience for a lot of guys.
Yeah, I've heard that from many. Now, when you moved to tight end, you had Heels and you had Doc. You had Marcus Wilson as two of your main quarterbacks during that time period. Both tremendous athletes, but their skill sets, to me, they were a little bit behind me, but I had the pleasure of being in quarterback room and competing against those guys. Vastly different athletes themselves. Right. What was, if you recall, did you ever get run up the back by Healy or by Doc, or have to catch any? Just Marcus had the strongest arm of any quarterback I'd ever been around, but poor guy, well, he had a bazooka. It wasn't always the most accurate at times, but he harnessed it after a while. But that was different playing with two different quarterbacks. I caught so few passes that quarterbacks didn't matter as much. I was really just double teaming with the offensive linemen and then trying to get downfield to cut folks. So most of my time was blocking. But I do remember there's this one play, I forget, it's one of Corey Harris's famous plays. I took the wrong step the wrong way, and my guy came in and killed the fullback. I hope it wasn't Carlos, but it might have been, but killed the fullback. There was a fumble. Corey Harris picked it up and ran for a touchdown. So it was one of our best plays. And I was so happy because I messed up the worst thing and my guy caused the problem. So I don't remember the quarterbacks as well because of the few passes I caught, but I do remember Corey and Carlos and a lot of those folks grinding, and us, all the offensive linemen grinding with them. Well, that's one of those plays that you're watching on Sunday morning, like you're doing this and you're like, okay, well, but we scored.
That's right. That's right.
All right, Pat, let's back up. Let's back up to Cleveland. You take your visits, you're a multi-sport athlete, as many collegiate coaches have yelled for years. the best type of athlete is the one who plays a different sport throughout the year because of burnout, because of injury overuse, et cetera. And you were one of those who played basketball, you played football, I'm sure you played other sports. Did you have a favorite growing up? Did you have aspirations of playing some sport on the collegiate level? And when did that all kind of come into fruition for you?
Yeah, good question. So I started in fourth grade. A lot of us probably did way back when, right? With Catholic Youth League. Had one of those red dots on my helmet because I weighed too much. I couldn't touch the ball. But that started, I really got into it there, was excited about it. And my dad, who was my middle school coach, so played for him for 2 years. And then he coached at Parma High School, which was our rival. I went to Valley Forge throughout high school while I was in high school. A good story is he had to walk me out parent night when we played each other, our rival game. He wouldn't talk to me. He was so intense. I was a little different personality. I was more relaxed. He was so intense that he wouldn't talk to me as we walked out for parent night.
All right, who won that game?
We won. We were better at that window than they were. But I always, probably from a dad being a football coach, I had two older brothers. Both of them played early. My middle brother, he was in the Air Force. He passed away in service, but he was kind of a model for me playing football. So it was always more football than basketball. Basketball was sort of a pastime. I had really good friends in there. And then our high school went to the Final Four in Ohio, which was kind of unheard of for our public school in our little area. We had guys that were just bombing threes. So we just ran and pressed and bombed threes the whole time. Now, I was just setting picks and trying to get bounds. That's all I could do. So I was not super athletic, but I probably would definitely be football, definitely the urge to play. I just didn't know any different. People asked about Vanderbilt experience, and I really almost remember football more than anything else. I remember some great professors, but really just remember football because it was so ingrained and that's what I was there for. That's what I was doing. So I think that was just the thought of starting in fourth grade, dad as a coach, just continue on. That's what I was supposed to do.
Excellent. Now, were you the type of kid growing up that just had all this bundle of energy, and you had the brothers, y'all were constantly getting into something in the neighborhood, in the house, wherever, and is that how you got your energy out? Or I suspect you weren't the kind, and this was on the onset of video games and things. I can't see you sitting around with a lot of downtime doing that.
No, we definitely not. My brothers, I remember when I was in fourth grade, sixth grade, something like that. My brothers piled me in the car and they took me to a wrestling match. I wrestled in middle school, but they took me to a wrestling match. They taught me the half Nelson on the way in the car and just threw me out there in a tournament, wrestling tournament. So they definitely were impactful and getting me in and roughing me up a little bit and getting going. Now I got bigger than them faster. They're both smaller than me. So that changed a little bit, but no, I don't remember playing many video games. We played Nerf hoop in someone's house. We went to the local community college and played open rec basketball the entire time. So I was also a pretty good student. So stayed busy both with school and running around with sports.
Yeah, not to sound like the old guy in the room, but it just seems like today's youth, their experience obviously is way different than ours just because of technology and just society, but there's also more opportunities for them to, and maybe they've been conditioned, not all kids, but most kids are conditioned to maybe have a little bit more downtime. They've got the phones in their hand or the games, whatever. I didn't know anything about gaming. It certainly wasn't part of my childhood as well. We too were the neighborhood, when the street lights came on, it was time to come in, kind of a childhood. Pat, we got Jeff Crosby has just joined the conversation.
Oh, cool. I actually, I work as a clinical mental health counselor outside of work some because I train counselors and prepare counselors. And a lot of the kids I see, teenagers especially, gaming is so influential to them, like you're saying, but they also that's where their social network is, unlike us hanging out with people and just going different places. They do some of that, but man, they have a huge social network, which is good and bad. There's some good parts of it, but there's a lot of bad influences too. But it really does drive their time on technology.
And I know you and I could veer this conversation for the next 2 hours about mental health and all those things, but we'll pause that before we get too deep into that for tonight.
Sure.
But I want to talk about you get recruited by Villanova, Michigan State, I'm sure some other schools. You come to Vanderbilt, and it happens to be, I assume, a mild weather visit. Do you remember who your hosts were? And did you go to a steroids party in Carmichael Towers as part of your visit?
You know what? I don't know who my host was. I was going to say Rod Keith, but I don't think that's true. I'm not positive who that was.
Rod would
boy,
probably he'd probably take credit for it.
Probably would. I mean, I have, remember Brothen, you couldn't miss Brothen with those, his arms there, right? Guys that once I got there said more, and some people, I remember Stump, all kind of folks, but I don't remember exactly who was my tour guide there. I just know that I came down after 2 snowstorms to beautiful weather. You got the warm salesman, Watson Brown, who could, lured us in, and just thought the opportunity was great. So it was a no-brainer. I wasn't very highly recruited. So Vanderbilt, when I went there, Villanova, when I went there, they said, hey, you can get up to about 275, 280 and be the next Howie Long. And I was like 225. I said, no, I don't want to be that heavy. Well, at Vanderbilt, I think I weighed 265 or so as tight end. So I got there anyways.
Were you recruited initially on the defensive line, or was there beginning discussion even in your recruitment about potentially moving over to tight end?
Well, when Gromos was a quarterback then with you, you guys were not running kind of a wishbone type of look there. So when I was recruited, Bill Schmitz liked me because he thought I used my hands well, and I had kind of long arms. So he thought defensive end is where I'd be. So I was recruiting definitely for defense. I think the move to offense came when we started talking about switching to running a different kind of offense. If I remember this right now, so I blew out my knee my second year there. That was Watson's last year, and then when it transitioned to Dinardo, so I came back kind of on the offensive side of the ball.
I gotcha. And and I don't know this, I'm speculating, probably with Schmitz watching you in basketball, you also probably had very good feet work. And that probably translates very well to either the defensive line, particularly tight end. But we got the Jones brothers, Jody and Dwayne, both said to tell you hello, and they're
nice. Good to see everybody here, buddy. Yeah, it's great.
I've got Pat Akos as my guest tonight, and we're just running through some time back in the day. And Pat, you come on to campus. Who do you room with your freshman year? Were you over at Branscombe as a freshman?
I was. Yeah, I was with Chris Donnelly. Now, Chris Donnelly came in, and I don't know if you remember, he transferred to Alabama after a little while.
He did.
But that was fun. That Branscombe floor, a lot of fun there. I think one time Chris Donnelly and I put on New Kids on the Block as loud as we could make it on the stereo on repeat, and then we went out for the night. So I'm sure our RA did not enjoy us that much.
That's awesome. And of course,
but Chris Donnelly, and then I room with Tom Vincent some in the summer, Eric Dahlberg, lived with Chris Coron and a couple other folks in a house. So all those folks during my time.
Good. And going back to Donnelly, yeah, he ended up at Alabama, played for a few years, had some success there. His brother Brian was a walk-on briefly with us as well. Ryan's closer to my age.
Right.
Pat, let's talk about the academic transition from Valley Forge High School to Vanderbilt. It doesn't matter what high school you came from academically, trying to combine Vanderbilt's rigorous academics, playing in the SEC, learning how to be a freshman in college, having a social life, all of those things converging as I assume 18-year-old freshman, they're not easy, even for the guys who are redshirting, particularly if you're trying to earn some playing time. How was your transition that freshman year?
It wasn't bad. I have to tell you, one of the most significant figures there for me was Brad Bates. I think a lot of folks might say that. Now, I came in, Brad Bates was our strength and conditioning coach, right? We're doing the Valentine Day Massacre. We're doing all the fun stuff that he created for working out. And then by the time I was leaving, he earned his EDD and he was our academic coordinator. So, folks like that, really helped with transition. I know people were worried about the morning calls from Brad Bates to make sure they were in class. But I did think I was going to do genetics and stuff when I first started. And I took that weed out course in biology my first year and got my D and said, okay, I got to figure this out a little bit. When I blew out my knee, I was kind of blown off classes, and I had a couple education professors at that time really set me straight. So learned a lot there. And so I think I landed in the right spot. My dad, as I said, was a teacher. I think education was the right spot for me, and had just great professors, Marcy Singer Gabella and this Clara Schmirker. I still have products from that class, those 2 classes from those ladies, and learned so much about education. So I think it was people like Brad, and even as a weight coach, just kind of a mentor kind of thing coming in. The opportunities Vanderbilt provides, the supports they provided, and then, landing in the right major and with really great faculty that really helped me. I still kind of had football always as a primary thing for me, but opportunities were so good and support was so good that I think you could still be a very successful student.
Yeah, it was, and it's gotten even better over the last couple of decades about the support that Vanderbilt supplies to its student athletes. And we were just during the late 80s, early 90s, they were really just getting that going to the extent that they really wanted it. I had Dr. Ann Neely on last week, last week, I think it was. I don't know if your paths ever crossed at that time. But
she was very influential. I saw her on, and I knew how important she was to the football program, but also, she was a huge figure in Peabody, so she was influential.
Yeah. And she's always been so great about being a liaison, not just between the departments where she was at the different times with the athletics department, but educating the professors who know nothing about how student athletes, what they go through. And enough can't be said in praise of her for what she did over those years. But I want to transition away from there to a very specific one-day occurrence that we all lovingly now call it the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. Set the tone, set the stage, and we're going to go from there.
Well, okay, so you can fill in some dots there, but I think Brad put us in groups. So I think the tight ends were with the linebackers, maybe. He tried to balance them out. We had a car at the bottom of, was it McGugan parking garage? One of the parking garages that was next to the basketball.
Parking garage next to Memorial.
Next to Memorial.
Yeah, I just can't think of the name of it.
Right. They put it on the base floor. You had to pick one of your people to be the driver. The rest of us were pushing that car up the ramps, and so it was just a timed race. And I don't know what the rewards or punishments were for who lost and who won, but that kind of thing. He did human monopoly. I don't know if you were there then, but he took the weight room, he moved all these weights around, and he made a game board. And you basically rolled a die, and whatever you landed on, you had that machine, and you had to do whatever workout was on that machine. But just some of the inventive stuff like that kept it really fresh, kept it fun. But that is definitely a memory of kind of wearing out. Now, I think bell buckle, and what were those? Was that the 300 where you had to go back, down and back 6 times? That was the most physically taxing one. Some of those 110s you had to run, those were more physically taxing, because with the Valentine's Day and the human monopoly, at least it was a little bit of fun. You can think about it that way.
All right, Pat, even if you have to make it up, I want you to give your assessment on how Gerald Collins did on the day of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. I'm not saying it because he just joined the conversation. I truly want to know in comparison to that dunk contest.
Well, now he had a powerful bottom, so I think he probably was anchoring a little bit of getting that car up the hill. So I'm sure he did well. I don't remember specifically, but him and I remember having to block him and Shelton and trying to get them on the those linebackers get cut, and they were so damn athletic it was hard to chase them down.
I don't know if you could have chosen which one you preferred because they were both so athletic. But if I remember correctly, and Dwayne, I want you to correct me because I know you're the memory here. I think that if your team had the best time of pushing it up the parking deck, that you didn't have to go again. It was just the teams that were second and below had to keep going. And I'm not saying that Dwayne put extra weights in the trunk or that he kept his foot on the parking brake or that pulled the anyway. I just remember it being so cold and it was snowy. And you're right. The bigger picture here is that Coach Bates was very innovative, and just it could be very mundane and very just, oh, I don't want to do this again. But he was so creative. He was so creative back then.
You know, I just had coffee with him because he's actually an adjunct professor here at UNC-Chapel Hill. He after being athletic director and doing all of his roles, I think he's more of in a consulting role now, and he's doing some teaching and things. But same great guy, interested in how things were going for me, and just a really good guy. So I always held him as a mentor, kind of over time. Me going for my PhD, all that stuff, I think has a lot to do with who he was and what I learned from him.
That's so awesome. And we had Coach Bates on a while back, and he told some some great stories, but because he was still employed or still had employment opportunities, I think he kind of curtailed some of the full nature of the stories.
The stories.
Just like when I had, and I'm going to bring up John Norwig when John was on a while back. He's still very much employed by the Steelers, and he couldn't exactly use all the language and the descriptions that he normally did. But what a character!
Him and I went round and round because I blew out my knee that sophomore year, so. It was a couple of weeks after, and I was out on the tennis court hitting the ball around, and I got yelled at so much by Norwig. So him and I had a lot of fights about rehab and Tim trying to slow me down, I think, more than anything.
And Gerald's laughing at some of the comments here. Was Pinky Lipscomb your surgeon, or was it the younger apprentice?
It was Lipscomb. Yeah. I was covering a punt in practice. I think Derek Payne caught it. Did his good juke that Derek Payne could do, and I planted, and the knee dislocated so tore everything but that outside ligament, and went right to the hospital. I don't remember much of it because I went right to the hospital. I think 2 weeks after we beat LSU at home, and Dinardo gave me the game ball. I still got that on my shelf down the hall here.
Oh, how cool.
Yeah, it was one of the more memorable things.
Well, guys, if you're just joining us, I got Pat Akos, who's now a professor at UNC-Chapel Hill, and we're running through some of his journey a little bit. I want to know about, from a growth standpoint, you're a high school senior, you graduate Vanderbilt, and you're figuring out the next phase. Did you feel like you went through some maturity during that time period? You go from about age 18 to 22 or 23. I mean, I suspect you did, but what did you, I guess, from a life lesson standpoint, Pat, what do you still rely upon when you think back about that time period?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was going to say it was night and day in terms of physical maturity, in terms of the strength training and the kind of things that was available there that was not available where I was from. I don't think the maturity, just the regular maturity occurred until a little bit after. I think, I reflect back on the kind of things that I learned. I told you about Steve Sloan and how influential about being a man. I think Brad Bates and how impactful that was, and the modeling that he did. So there was, a lot of lessons learned during that time. But, when I left a year early because I thought I'd get drafted, thought I knew everything. So that tells you how mature I was at that window already. And then after getting cut, I didn't know what to do. I went home. I had a Vanderbilt degree. I went home and worked at UPS and went to a couple community colleges classes because I wasn't sure what to do. So I think part of the challenge is helping student athletes mature in terms of like career life roles that they're going to play later, because really all they think about it, or at least all I thought about, was being an athlete. So it took me a little bit while. It took me maybe a year later where some of that maturity kicked in. Started doing odd jobs, was a GA football coach at Morehead State. That's where I got my master's. So until that point started kicking in, I really didn't, I think, mature. So a lot of lessons were learned at Vanderbilt. I just don't think it clicked until a little bit later for me.
Yeah, I know that I had a buddy, we were talking about this. This tells you how, where my conversations go sometime, that for males, at least, from a physical standpoint, they're probably maturing ages 23, 24, 25. But from a mental standpoint, it may be 26, 27, 28 to when from a mental, they really are catching up, if you will. I don't know if that's the right term, but they're reaching some better plateaus from them from a mental maturity standpoint. I don't know if you agree with any of that, but
I think, it's everyone, there's probably a lot of diversity within that, but that was true for me, that it took a little bit while to have some life experiences. I think when I left Morehead, I went to University of Arkansas, and I was a student, like a counselor for student athletes, just like Bates was when we were there, kind of, again, following that mentor kind of role. And that helped me learn a lot when I started trying to help others and learn about myself a little bit. That's what kind of led me to the PhD. The counseling stuff, you tend to learn a lot about yourself. So I dove into that as much as I dove in athletics. I dove into kind of learning and really just ate it up. So that's what led me to do the PhD.
When you were at Arkansas, by chance, had Derek Gregg gotten there yet, or was that before Gregg?
That was before Derek Gregg got there. I know that he was there for an appointment, but this is when they went to the SEC championship game. I'm going to not get the date right, 95, 96, 97, somewhere in there.
He may have still been in school and not started his career path
No, we had Frank Broyles, and then we had Danny Ford was the coach. So if those of you that
Wow.
know Danny Ford, that was an experience trying to be the academic counselor for Danny Ford.
I bet it was. Oh, we got Jim Aguiano has just joined us. Hey, Jim, thanks, bud, for
Yeah,
spending
nice.
some time with Pat Akos tonight. Pat, let's move into adulthood. Let's move
Mhm.
into the real world. We all have this occurrence. At some point, we have to recognize our athletic careers from an organized standpoint, from a collegiate or pro or whatever that is. That day comes to an end, and now it's time to move on. For some of us, when we were finished playing, it was out of our system. We were done. It was time to move on. Others, it still lingered. Maybe you wanted to take a shot at the USFL or whatever league, pros, whatever league. Did you still have any of that? I know you said you left early in hopes of getting drafted, but did that continue on, or did you have a finite event that finally just said it's time to move on to the next phase of life?
Yeah, I mean, I was with the Bills throughout training camp all the way up to the season started. I got cut and went to New England for a day or two and got cut, and then didn't get calls, after that. And so the kind of door closes on you rather than you closing the door yourself. So
Yeah.
I was already sort of damaged goods. I had, I think, at least by that time, 2 or 3 knee surgeries and a back surgery. So I knew I wasn't the most athletic. I was a little bit damaged goods. So after that's when I headed home and trying to figure out what to do next. I played basketball a lot. I ran some. I think I did Chicago Marathon soon after that, but I knew playing days were over, so it was going to be more recreational athlete. And that's what I did. I first took that step to go coach at Morehead State. I'll tell you what, I know we did this as athletes, but watching film all day as a coach, I couldn't do it. it just didn't charge me up at all. What I found there at Morehead was I really liked being around the athletes and like what they were doing in life. And that's what led me to kind of a different career path from coaching.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Was it that exposure while you were at Morehead that really, it must have made an impression? Some of these athletes are just the give and take on a day-to-day basis. And is that where you ended up taking your career?
I mean, it was like, I trained as a teacher. So I went and student taught at high school. I think it was Hunters Lane High School in Nashville. And I at Morehead, I was really connecting with the kids. I coached receivers. I really had a great experience with them. It was some of the game planning and watching the film stuff that just didn't seem like the best way to spend my time. So I really enjoyed classes. I really enjoyed being around the students. And so that's what sort of led me that path to Arkansas, being more of an academic counselor versus a coach.
Well, I want to welcome Jim Arnold. Hey, Jim, good to see you this evening. Bud has just joined our Pat Akos conversation. Pat, as the years have gone on, you go into your 30s and 40s. Did you continue to follow the collegiate game?
Yeah. I like a lot of us old football players. I do fantasy football, both in college and pro fantasy football, things like that. And I tell, I think Josie and Brian Josie and Richard Sines and Coron, all of them, I think we did a FaceTime during the NFL draft last year. And that's the first time we could reconnect it as a group, but I'm still on the damn couch for the draft. I don't know why, but I can't, it's just something I still stay connected to and enjoy watching. So I as much a football fan as I always have been.
Well, I'll bring it up now. I was going to surprise wait for tomorrow. I was going to ask in our group, and I'll put a post out there. I was thinking about hosting an NFL draft night online open Zoom party, if you will, to watch the first round of the draft. And I'm wondering if we'll have enough guys who would want to do that. I think it could be kind of fun.
I bet so. I mean, you get some comments going in the chat, I'm sure, and it'd be kind of fun. It'd be hard to moderate depending on how many you get, but it would be fun.
Yeah, and thankfully it's just to this closed group, because I wouldn't want to open it up because you never know what you would get outside of this group.
It's fun, Bernard, and you asked about, staying with athletics. I had 2 daughters, played volleyball and lacrosse. My youngest plays lacrosse at the Air Force Academy as a club sport. But, being around someone like Brian Josie, who has this kid playing Noah at Virginia. And, one of the pictures that you posted was with Rico Francis, him and I going to his kids game, and Rico's son's playing at Wake Forest. So really fun to just watch my peers and the kind of athletes that, Clint Small has a kid playing baseball is going to commit to Texas or has committed to Texas. So following some of the athletic careers, of my friends' kids is really fun too.
And it's interesting that you say that. Two of my former teammates, Henry Beelan and Bobby Craycraft, both of their sons have just committed to play in college next year. And I think they both going to Duke, I think. So maybe they'll I think they're in the same class. So that would be
maybe not excellent now that I work at UNC, but that's okay.
Yeah, they're coming for you, Akos. Guys, I'm talking with Pat Akos, and we're just kind of all over the board a little bit. You brought up your daughters who are clearly athletes themselves. We're going to assume they get some of the athleticism from their father. We don't know about the rest of the family's genes, but you also mentioned your brother who you lost in service. And I know that one of your daughters was named in part in his memory. To the extent that you have some good memories about your brother and his athleticism and the influences that he had on you. You mentioned a little bit about, I guess, the half Nelson and stuff. Was sports for all three of you growing up, was that an integral part of your childhood memories?
Oh God, yeah. My oldest is a professor at CU Boulder. Actually, he's avionics, electrical engineering. So he's actually a rocket scientist. So I'm the dumb one in the family. But he was more of a wrestler. Mike was the middle one that passed away. He was a swimmer, football player. He actually went to Ohio State and then swam at Ohio State for a year or two, and then joined the military after as a pilot. So sports, man, we got together. We used to do these things called AB holiday, Akos brother holiday. So us three would meet up somewhere. Our first one was the Alcatraz shark swim. So, they take you out on a ferry to Alcatraz and they drop you in the water and you have to swim those shark infested waters back to shore. And Mike, my brother Mike,
just because
well, we had to do good holidays, but so always challenge ourselves a little bit. But my brother Mike would drink the night before. He didn't train at all, and you drop him in the water and he'd be not the first one, but he would just do it no problem. He could push himself to extremes that I could not, and it was just great. My other one didn't do as well, but we did, Akos brother holidays like that. We did an orienteering one in North Carolina, dropped in the middle of the woods. And so we did a lot of fun stuff like that. So definitely sports influence, but also just, challenging yourself and being active and things like that.
And your daughter, who's named in his memory, do you see some of those traits in her now?
Yeah. Her name's Riley Mike Akos. And so again, she just started the academy. So one of those pictures you posted was her basic training, learning to shoot. But I could tell both of them were athletic. The oldest one, Dalton, is tall, and she played volleyball and she was very competitive. But the younger one, Riley, was super competitive. I remember we would dive for pennies in the pool, and we go down there and I say, let's race, and we dive in. She would be pulling off my goggles because she thought she'd be able to get to it. And then she's like 8 and she's trying to pull off my goggles to get to the penny first. So
love it.
I probably taught her some of those tricks, but she's uber competitive.
It sounds like some Gerald Collins activity right there, maybe some influence. Pat, let's talk about you being the father of athletes. At what age did it dawn on you? Because all dads, all parents to a certain extent go through this. I certainly did. I had a daughter who played lacrosse in college. I have to give up being the coach. I'm just the dad, and I've got to sit on the sidelines. I can't interfere anymore, or you'll get the death stare, from the sidelines.
For sure.
Did you go through any of that?
Well, the blessing was they were daughters, so I didn't have a son that I would be seeing myself in too much, I think. Mm-hmm. The second thing was they chose volleyball and lacrosse, and the youngest one played rugby. Some 3 sports that I really never played competitively. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know enough to be able to help in lacrosse. I had no idea what the rules were and how that worked. So that helped a lot in terms of, trying to not coach from the stands. My biggest probably push in their I don't know what it is, not regret, but their anger was how much I encourage them to work at it when they weren't practicing, when they weren't at the games, and when they weren't at practice. You know, hey, you got this weekend, why don't you put some time in, you know, that kind of thing. And so probably nagged way too much. I have a picture of my oldest daughter that we put in a 5K when I was studying at Virginia for my doctorate, and we had her in a race and she had no idea what's going on. I think she had a note there, like, I think I wrote her a note. I said, sorry, I pushed you so hard, Dalton. I just wanted you to be successful. And she had this from like when she was 7 or 8, 9, something like that. She pulled out, made me tear up a little bit, but I know I pushed him hard on, you know, being successful. But at the games, I would just sit back and kind of watch.
Well, you and I should have shared some notes back in the day. I could have shared with you some of the mistakes I made, might have spared you a little bit. But Pat, let's talk about the current athlete. Do you have any opinions one way or the other? And I do realize you're employed by the university, so you can defer not to answer. The two biggest things right now, obviously in the last 2 years, have been the transfer portal. Some love it and some despise it. There seems to be no middle ground there. And then the name, image, and likeness that is just a wild west right now. Again, if any of this might infringe on your employment, don't go there. But if you can, do you have any thoughts you want to share for conversation wise on that?
You ever listen to the Dan Le Batard show? You ever hear that on ESPN? Now they're private. So they really rally for students' opportunity because of how the NCAA makes money and such, and how coaches can just leave and go. And that resonates with me some. I think that, you know, times have changed since we played, and I think that there is a need for opportunity and ability to earn money, or at least a share of the money that's earned in terms of the big operation that sports is. The one thing that bothers me though is that show, and then a lot of folks neglect the education and the cost of college. I always thought that we should, if we're going to do this in terms of pay players, is you go ahead and come and we'll pay you. And then what we'll do is you'll pay for your education and your food and your benefits and your housing outside of from your pay. Because I think what gets neglected is this scholarship, this opportunity. I had to go to Vanderbilt from a public school in Cleveland and learn and grow and have all this opportunity. That was payment to me. You know, that I didn't need a name, image, and likeness. I'm sure I wouldn't be one getting those benefits, but I didn't need that because I had this huge scholarship that was life-changing for me. So I think that sort of gets lost in this picture that that's still a benefit for a lot of student athletes. I won't say that. I am happy that folks have more opportunity to even earn more. I think that's fair. So I don't have strong opinions either way. I just hate that some people neglect that how big the scholarship and the opportunity is to play.
Yeah. No, you're so right. That doesn't sell the newspapers though. What sells the newspapers are the $8 million supposed deals with the California quarterback coming to Tennessee. He's never played it down. I mean, I don't know how legitimate that news is about $8 million, but what it does show is that's the next arms race. If your school doesn't have a collective, is what they're calling them, and doing these creative things for its student athletes, then you're losing out. And I was so very pleased to see that Vanderbilt, Notre Dame, and maybe 2 other schools have all signed or recently signed with NBC. I don't know what the details, what that means, other than it's opportunities for our student athletes, regardless of sport, have that to make us to continue to be competitive. But Pat, a whole bunch of folks just rolled in. I'll let you get to your thought in just a second. My former teammate and roommate, Fred Peterson, Jason Tomachek, Kenny Cole, Brian Kopke, thank you guys for all coming. We're talking with Pat Akos right now. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Pat, but I just wanted to get in there.
Yeah, no, again, I don't have anything against it. I think maybe we should think about those boosters and others putting a lot of money towards this versus other causes they might be able to help people out with. So, I won't get into mental health and some of the other issues that are out there and the kind of money that goes towards athletics, but there's other things that they can invest in too.
All right, I want you to think about the guys in your recruiting class, okay? Just a few of the names, just keep them to yourself. Back in the day, which of those guys would have paired up with what NIL deal around Nashville and the campus going on at that time? Give me a name and give me a product or a company.
Name and a product. I was going to say the 2 pretty boys would be Donnelly and Jeff Brothers. That's an easy one. Okay. Those 2 go, and maybe Tony Jackson. but product wise, Jeff would have to be something.
We got Christie's cookies. We got Tony Romo's ribs. We got Fudd Puckers.
Hey, Donnelly's going to be some used car kind of thing because he would be able to do that. Brian the same way probably.
Yeah.
But I think Brothers would be something Southern, something people. I don't know. It wouldn't be Waffle House, but it'd be something Southern that people would ease into.
Yeah. All right, now who would be paired up with White Castle?
White Castle. Well, I was going to tell you the story about Josie and Richard Sines. So in Towers, remember how they had that cafeteria in the bottom of that? Mm-hmm. One of the most memorable things is those two would go down there. They would order 2 large subs and 2 large pizzas. They would take the sub and they would scrape all the meat off the sub onto the pizza. They fold that boy up and they eat it like a taco. They were amazing. So if there was some sort of eating thing, those two might have been the NIL on that.
Wow. Well, I forgot Grand Ole Opry could have been a sponsor back in the day. Yeah. Anyway, you guys were just having a good conversation with Pat Akos. Pat, when was the last time you were on campus?
Oh, I'd say Mike's cell could have been deja vu too, but we'll leave that one out.
Hey, he's not here to defend himself.
No, last time on campus, I was in Nashville. Earlier this spring or in the fall, we went to a Preds game, probably spring. I guess we went to a Preds game and kind of walked around campus a little bit. Saw a lot of the development. I haven't been in the actual building in a bit. I sent you one of those pictures. It was a little bit ago, but I was in Nashville, I think in the fall.
I was going to say, even since the fall, there's been changes on campus. A lot of what used to be driving is now pedestrian. Obviously, the Carmichael Towers, rest in peace. They're all being redone. And I think if you come back to the school, when school opens up again in September, it'll even look different then, because it seems like every 30 days, there's a new building coming up or going down.
It's a sign of a thriving campus. The campuses that are always rebuilding and stuff like that. That's a thriving campus. So that's good.
Well, and this is certainly not meant to be a knock, but considering what the sticker price is now to go to Vanderbilt, I'm not surprised. But how pleased are you about Vandy United and what you're seeing and hearing about the upgrades and just trying to get into this century with all the facilities and what's going on momentum wise?
Yeah, it sounds real promising. To be honest, I haven't followed as much, Bernard, as I probably don't know as many of the details as I'd like to. But the kind of communications I did see, it seems like they're investing quite a bit. And, it's always going to be hard to compete in this conference. But it seems like people are really excited about Coach Lee and the kind of things that are happening. So I'm just hopeful. I'd love to see it, us get back to maybe where Franklin was, those days, have some success that way.
Oh, so I guess you haven't seen the commitment by the class of '89 from a financial standpoint, what you owe. Okay, we'll get together after this is over.
We got a public school faculty member, public school faculty in education. Okay, remember that. I don't do law like some other people.
Guys, I'm talking with Pat Akos. Pat, have you watched any collegiate games, whether they're UNC or SEC games in the last couple of years? What do you like? Yes. What do you not like? What's different now?
Stay tuned in quite a bit. Boys at night and day. I went to a couple practices with some folks I told you, Mac Brown, he really generous, like Watson, and he invited me. I was able to come down and watch some of the practices. The energy, the music they have going, the lack of contact was also interesting. So just real different in terms of what I remember in terms of practice and such. But like everybody, bigger, faster, stronger, man. So it's a different ball game in terms of what we were doing. But it's just, being around that kind of energy stuff is still really exciting. It gets you pumped up no matter who if you played, it gets you pumped up no matter how old you are, I think. What
was your height and weight at your apex at Vanderbilt?
Well, apex, it depends on how fat I am there or not. But I think I played at some point, like 6'5", 265, especially when we were running that wishbone with Dinardo. I think I came in around 230, as I said, and I might have left around more like 250. So I kind of ranged in there.
Isn't it amazing? 6'5", 265. That's a big dude, but not by today's standards.
Oh,
you might even have quarterbacks that are about that big these days.
Yeah, and I was running nowhere near as fast as those folks too.
Yeah. Well, Pat, I don't know. It's one of these conversations, and I'm truly enjoying our talk. I don't even know where to go next because there's so many things to talk about. But here's where I kind of want to, as we get toward the end, you've been in higher education now for many years and on the collegiate level, and you've been around the 18 to 22-year-old students for many years. And we were all that back in the day. And this is not going to be an easy question, maybe for someone, I don't know, maybe you've got your hand on this. Because the experience of the 18 to 20-year-olds collegiate experience, I'm going to assume is vastly different, particularly during COVID, than it ever was back in our day. Social media, the world is so much smaller. The instant, I call it instant gratification. If I don't have my answer right now, as well as the goldfish attention span, like 2 seconds, 3 seconds. With all of that, there still has to be some commonality about what the kids go through now going to college from what we went through. And I don't know really, I guess I just want your perspective on what you've observed in the last several years with that.
Yeah, Bernard, again, a lot of group diversity. There's a lot of kids coming to college that are 24, 25. So it depends on the type of college you're at. And there's such a range of colleges. So it's hard to give one kind of blanket statement about everybody, but there's this theorist Arnett that writes about emerging adulthood, they call it. And one of the big tasks in emerging adulthood is identity. And if you think back to middle school days, that's what I used to be a middle school counselor back when, and it's the same kind of thing. It's like you're starting to make, autonomous choices for the first time, who you spend time with, how you spend your money, the kind of things that you do. And so all that starts shaping who you are as a person. So while it looks like sometimes, whether that's mental health or goldfish attention span, I think a lot of it's just trying to figure stuff out. And, that window has extended a bit. As we know, a lot of people live with their parents longer and things like that. But this emerging adulthood of figuring out what it means to be an adult takes some time, and it takes some trials and tribulations. You make some wrong decisions, and that helps you learn about where you're going to go to. So I think that's a common thread from our time as well, that you are this emerging adulthood, you're looking for identity and who you are as a person. The context is just so freaking different. COVID, war, BLM, I mean, all the things that are happening really make a different world for them to live in. And they, I shouldn't say this out loud as a faculty member, but you know what? They have access to every single piece of information that you can learn in college online. Yeah. The faculty role has shifted quite a bit to kind of, being a broker of information and how to evaluate good information and making it engaging and things like that. But such a different world than when we were there.
I certainly don't agree with Gary V's approach to why go to college if you have a good thing that you're building on. I don't agree with that. There's certain things that on the collegiate and graduate levels that you can't replace, particularly if you have to have a degree and then training and licensure. But you're right. There's so many more real world experiences. I don't think that, particularly for boys, I don't think that you necessarily always have to immediately rush off from high school to college. Why not take a gap year, learn a little bit more about yourself, grow a little bit more. But do you feel, and this is the last thing, and I know we're a little off topic, but Pat, do you see more, less, or about the same kind of stress on the kids, on themselves, trying to figure that out, their path at that age? Or is it still pretty consistent from when we were kids?
It's a good question, because it's hard to put my shoe, have a different perspective when I was going, because I had no interest in purpose or passion outside of football in my time. So, that's probably still an artifact for some student athletes in the way they think about stuff. They're definitely more business savvy in terms of the NIL and some of the things that are happening, of course. But I think that whole thing about finding your passion at 18 and 19 and 20 and figuring out your life path is just so much, not BS. It's an important stimulus, but to have that figured out is what I think the 18-year-olds feel like they're supposed to do. And it's just pressure that's not accurate. We just know that those timelines don't work out that way for everybody. And what you choose to do first, you might be doing 8 other things after that. So it's a lot of pressure we put on them. I think they feel a lot of pressure. Parents are different now than they used to be. So, all those things are a little bit different. So I think your original question was, the pathways and stuff. I think that they're still after trying to figure out what it is and who they are. It's just a lot of different context than it has been when we were growing up.
And I don't know if this is a good comparison, but the kid, and his name escapes me, Oscar, who's the SEC basketball player of the year, I saw recently he's coming back. And they're also in the same conversation. He's got about a $2 million value of NIL deals. Compare him with Scottie Pippen, same age, I think. And Pippen, who had a wonderful year again this past year, he's gone. And I realize we may be talking apples and oranges. I get that. Anyway, I think this may be a good place for us to kind of put a cork in it for now.
Yeah.
I could keep talking to you all day, but I truly have enjoyed our conversation tonight.
Well, it was great. It was great reflecting back on some of the names and experiences I had, Bernard. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. And guys, as we do every week, we'll come back each Tuesday. I appreciate Pat accommodating. We got a niece's birthday party tomorrow night that I cannot miss. Already been forewarned. So thank you, Pat, for moving tonight. But go into the group, guys. I've got guests for the next 7 weeks coming up, including Brian Murphy from the National Commodore Club. I got Kevin Brothen. Oh gosh, I'm drawing blanks now, but there's a whole bunch of folks. Jody Jones is next week, but we're going to keep doing these. These are great conversations. We're telling the history, the oral history of our program. We're sharing so many perspectives, and even better than all of that is we're bringing our fellow Commodores together in a bigger community. So that's just some good stuff. So again, Pat, thank you for spending some time with me tonight.
Got it. Good to see everybody. Thanks.
Hang around, Pat, for another 2 seconds. You guys.
You got it.
Anchor down. Have a good night.